let's talk about one of the biggest growth opportunities out there for any business today, expanding into Asia. Now, it's a place with just unbelievable promise, but, it's also incredibly complex. So let's just dive right in.
Okay, so to really wrap your head around the scale here, just look at this number. $35 trillion. That's the combined GDP of Asia. We're talking about a region with, over 4.5 billion people and the fastest growing middle class on the planet. I mean, the potential for growth, it's just massive. It's almost hard to comprehend.
And this is the big but, right? With a prize that huge, the path to get there is absolutely littered with traps. We've seen even the biggest, most experienced global companies stumble and fall. So how do you actually do it? How do you navigate that landscape and win?
Well, when you talk to the experts who've spent decades on the ground there, success really boils down to one thing. It's about avoiding one single crucial mistake. If you can get this one thing right, it pretty much sets the stage for everything that follows.
And that brings us right to our first section. We've got to talk about the One Asia myth. Seriously, this is probably the biggest, most costly mistake that companies make when they try to expand there.
Look, it all boils down to this really simple but incredibly powerful idea. Asia is not a single entity. It is not one market. And believe me, some of the world's biggest companies, they've learned this the hard way. They've tried to roll out the exact same e-commerce strategy in, say, Singapore, Indonesia, and Vietnam, and it's been a complete and utter failure. A one-size-fits-all strategy, it's just a recipe for disaster.
And just to see how different it really is, let's just do a quick comparison. Take a market like Singapore, right? And put it up against its neighbors, Vietnam or Indonesia. In Singapore, you're going to find a very direct, let's get down to business communication style. The rules are transparent, they're business-friendly, but then you hop over to Vietnam or Indonesia, and suddenly it's all about indirect communication. It's all about relationships. And the regulations, they can feel like they're changing on you from one day to the next. I mean, we're talking about fundamentally different worlds here.
Okay, so if a single strategy for all of Asia is out, where in the world do you even start? Well, the answer, almost every single time, starts with people. And that brings us perfectly to our second section, really getting a handle on people, culture, and relationships. In a lot of Western business cultures, a deal is all about the transaction. It's driven by the product specs, the price, the terms, but in so much of Asia, that's just not how it works. A deal only happens after you've built a solid foundation of personal trust and credibility. If you try to rush that part, it's seen as a huge red flag, like you're just in it for a quick win. And that can kill a deal before you've even had a real conversation.
And look, this isn't just some vague, fluffy cultural idea. This has a real, measurable impact on your bottom line. The data actually shows that companies that spend 30 to 40% of their early market entry money just on building relationships, they might start a bit slower, but over the long haul, they absolutely crush their competitors. So you have to think of it as a strategic investment, not just being polite.
And that whole idea of building relationships, it leads us straight to the next huge point. You just can't do it with a team of expats flying in. One of the biggest hidden traps companies fall into is underinvesting in senior local leaders. You need people who already have the industry know-how, the cultural fluency, and, this is the key, the established networks of trust that take years to build.
And here's the payoff for making that investment. It's huge. Having those respected local leaders on your team can literally cut your market entry time by 30, even 40%. They just speed everything up, from navigating tricky regulations to opening the right doors. It's an absolutely massive competitive advantage.
Okay, so you've got the right people on board. Awesome. But now they have to operate inside this incredibly complex system. And that leads us to our next big challenge, navigating the maze of local rules and, of course, finding the right talent.
Honestly, the regulatory landscape can feel like you're walking through a minefield. And it's not just one thing, it's a whole bunch of things hitting you at once. So in Vietnam, you might run into this negative list that says foreigners can't own certain businesses. Then in Malaysia, you've got local equity requirements and data laws. Over in Indonesia, you might need a mandatory halal certification, which is a whole complicated process on its own. Every single market has its own rulebook, and to make it even more fun, that rulebook is changing all the time. And trying to find the people to help you navigate all this, it's a real paradox. You look at a market like Indonesia and you see this huge young population. You think,
Great, talent pool. But then you find out there are actually critical skill shortages and what's often called an underskilled workforce. And to top it off, there are often really strict limits on what jobs foreigners can even have, like in HR or supply chain. So it becomes even tougher to fill those crucial roles.
All right, so we've laid out a lot of challenges here. And yeah, it can feel a little daunting. But here's the good news. There are proven, time-tested strategies you can follow. So let's pivot to the solutions and talk about choosing your entry roadmap.
Basically, you've got three main roads you can go down. There's the conservative road. That's where you dip your toe in the water, test things out in one beachhead market for a year or two. Then you've got the aggressive path. That's full speed ahead, high investment, trying to penetrate the market fast. But the one that we see succeed most consistently is the planned roadmap. The whole idea here is depth before breadth. It's all about building a really strong, sustainable foundation first.
So let's actually walk through what that planned roadmap looks like in action. Step 1, you spend a lot of time. We're talking 9 to 18 months just on deep planning and strategy. And this is before you put any serious money on the table. Then, and this is so important, step 2 is you hire your key local leadership. You do this before you even start building out your operations. Why? Because they are essential for step 3, which is adapting your entire operational model to fit the local culture. And I don't just mean translating your website, I mean really adapting. It's only after that's done that you move to step 4, where you use those leaders and your new model to build those critical business relationships. Once that foundation is rock solid, and only then are you finally ready for step 5, to scale up and expand with real confidence.
So when you strip away the strategies, the roadmaps, the data, what does it really take to win in the long run? Well, it all comes together in our final section here. It's all about adopting the right mindset.
Ultimately, a winning mindset for Asia seems to rest on these 4 pillars. First, you've got to be in it for the long haul. You have to avoid that dreaded 18-month reality check, where companies get antsy and just pull the plug too early. Second, you have to be constantly adapting. The market changes, so you have to change with it. Third, deep localization. We're talking about everything: your product, your services, your operations. And finally, you need what they call a beginner's mindset. That means you're confident in what you bring to the table, but you're also humble enough to know that you have a lot to learn.
And that really brings us to the final core question you have to ask yourself. As you think about this whole journey, it all comes down to this one thing. Are you building your strategy for a quick transaction or for a lasting relationship? Because in the end, the companies that truly thrive in Asia, they're the ones that know the answer to that question. Thanks for joining me for this explainer.